Okay, so my thinking is that this is probably the last video. My guess is we're going to be able to finish in 15. Now, what I've done is written down some potential, the Apple's position in the smartphone arena is, quote, sustainable. So the idea being, here are some potential advantages that Apple might have that can lead it to sustainable profits over time, or extreme profits over time. One is this notion of the App Store that is a great advantage for the smartphone as well. So similar to the iPod strategy, an important strategic move by Apple was to create an ecosystem around the iPhone, from accessories to third-party developed applications. With the App Store, Apple created the first outlet that made it easy to distribute, access, and download apps directly onto a mobile phone. And the App Store has 185,000 available apps and had 4 billion downloads in about 18 months. Google's Android app store, so to speak, the closest competitor, is a distant second in terms of the number of apps. So this focus on the store shifts the dynamics towards software rather than hardware as the major decision factor in purchasing a phone. So this notion of the apps as a complementary set of products is critical. Remember, so the App Store and the applications for both the iPhone and the iPod are critical. Notice these are two competitive advantages that may enhance the sustainability of those products. Now, also there's this notion of economies of scale. So Mac, the iPod, and the iPhone all share marketing, distribution, brand, and co-development costs, which is beneficial to both and allows the per unit cost for each one of the products to be lowered. Economies of scale, like with the iPod, flash memory is a key component of the iPhone. Well, and so we've already talked about the fact that Apple has very strong bargaining power because it buys such in bulk, so to speak, and as a consequence, there are joys of buying on a large scale. Now, here are a handful of positions on, or potential, the position is unsustainable answers. Now, for one is just the competition. The iPhone's made impressive inroads into the market, but Nokia has a 45% worldwide market share, so it's a very strong competitor. RAM has a strength with corporate users, so with its own niche. On the OS front, Microsoft could make a comeback. And many phone manufacturers, including HTC and Motorola, have embraced Google's open-sourced Android. So the open-sourced essentially means it's free for everybody, and the standard is available for anybody. Given the role of apps in smartphone competition, a threat emerges if the Android ecosystem becomes a success. Currently, it has not yet, but to the extent that phone manufacturers embrace it, it may well be able to create a larger ecosystem. There's also the supplier power issue. Apple must balance a positive relationship with the two particular carriers, AT&T and Verizon Wireless, if it's going to continue to do well. And both of these two carriers have significant market power and could seek alternatives. Another issue is it possible that the iPhone is a fashion item and it will just subside over time? So all these in mind, I'm not going to go into a more detailed sustainable discussion on the iPad, but to be sure, as we all I think well know, the iPad has absolutely defined the tablet market, and within a year and a half, it became a $35 billion business. So, just to give you a few arguments that it could be that the iPad success is sustainable because it's a slick design, it's easy to use like the other products are. It's got a first mover position in the tablet market, so it's basically like a generic brand. If you're going to buy a tablet, it's like buying, you say Kleenex instead of a tissue because Kleenex is such a strong brand. So maybe when you refer to tablets instead, you say Apple. So there's a very strong position there. And things like the market is growing and maybe some tablets could displace PCs, and the economies of scope with other products are substantial. as well. A few downsides might be that there are quite a few competition folks who are copycatting the tablet, like Samsung and Google with the acquisition of Motorola. And, there's also a question of how much room is there for really rich innovation with the iPad, because the new one was really a tweak on the iPad 2 rather than really a substantially different product. So to be sure, let me even pull this up. I hadn't thought to do this right now, but let's see, to show you, to go to Apple's website, it's very interesting because you look and you've got the Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad. This is a brilliantly run company I want to say that it's going to be about a $180 to $200 billion revenue-driven business this year. And yet it's got a very narrow product line. Here are the 4 major products, and they all fit on a homepage. So it's pretty incredible what Apple's been able to do. In terms of thinking about going forward, here are 3 plausible Apple futures, and you'll see that one is optimistic, one is more neutral, and the other actually suggests some decline. So, on a very optimistic front, which I would think it appears to be the case, at least for the ongoing future, that Apple retains a very dominant position. So the iPad continues to dominate the tablet market. The iPhone does for the smartphone as well. iPod sales continue unabated, and the Mac actually gains market share, potentially because of the halo effect of the other products and just a very strong brand, and potentially even for people who want to use the iCloud. That's another possibility to sync all of their information on all their various Apple products. Another one is just a scenario could be that Apple just levels off, that Android phones and tablets pressure the average sales prices and put pressure on Apple to innovate. The iPhone cannibalizes iPod sales. That's potential, as it is doing to some extent. And the music labels weaken iPod's position. And then Google and Microsoft chip away at advantages in computers and phones. And then lastly is the assertion that Apple's peaked, that mobile phone manufacturers take over the lead with their open standard approach versus Apple's proprietary standard approach, that MP3 players just disappear altogether due to the competition and substitutions. Macs falter again due to being overly pricey, and they are very expensive, and the iPad is ultimately a fad. So again, if we go back to what were the 4 purposes of Apple, here we go. So if you look, again, what we've done is we've looked at industry analysis, competitive positioning, and sustainability analysis, and we've talked about what is strategy and the 5 forces model, how they apply. We've looked at industry structure over time and its implication for strategic positioning, because as you notice, a few of the comments that I made about how Apple was weakened was due to shifts in the industry structure and Apple's lack of accommodation of those changing forces. In addition, with the iTunes iPod, there was an opening in the industry in an industry structure, the entertainment world, and Apple took advantage of it. The timing of strategic moves, for example, the idea that Apple switched from its IBM processing CPU to Intel CPU, and was able to do that by accommodating any losses because of the very strong iPod business at the time. And then just as the challenge of reinvigorating competitive advantage through innovation. The idea was that Apple was a strong PC manufacturer, went through a downturn, and then reinvented itself through innovation to now becoming one of the most admired companies in the world. I will send you an email with further details as to how to proceed.